Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Adhishri and I lead communications and advocacy at Global School Leaders. Today we are so excited to welcome you to the second School Leadership Matters Summit. We're on day 2 in our last session for the day. Before we begin, here are a few guidelines to ensure that this session runs smoothly. Please select the interpretation option at the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred language to follow the discussion seamlessly. This session is available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French. This session will last 60 minutes, which includes dedicated time for questions and answers at the end of the session. Please do use the Q&A feature to ask questions throughout the session, and the speakers will try and answer as many as possible. As attendees, please also ensure that the comments are respectful in the chat, ensuring a positive and productive environment. Now that we have that out of the way, hola, hello, and bonjour, and welcome to all. We are thrilled to have you join us today, and especially thank you to those of you who are waking up early in the morning or staying up late at night to join us for this really exciting discussion. Today, we're joined by an excellent panel from across the Global South and beyond. We are grateful to have Ellen Abakah, Senior Lecturer at the University of Ghana, play the role of moderator today. She is joined by panelists Martha Muhwezi, Executive Director of FAWE, which is the Forum of African Women Educationalists, Agustina Castillo, a school leader from Argentina and part of Global School Leaders' SheLeads program, Amanda Sadalla, co-founder and CEO of Serenas, and Antara Ganguli, Director at United Nations Girls Education Initiative. Today's session explores how school leadership can be a powerful lever for gender equity and what it takes to make that leadership last. We will also have a series of polls to have you, our wonderful audience, join the conversation, so please do keep an eye out for those questions. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming our panelists, and over to you, Ellen.
Thank you very much. Thank you to my panelists and then to you audience out there. And you are very much welcome to this afternoon section. It's indeed our pleasure as a moderator and then on behalf of my panelists as well. And we've gathered here with just one goal, which is to actually deliberate on how school leaders can actually foster an inclusive and equitable school systems, and considering their role in molding our children and also the issues of gender inequality that continuously pervade in our school system. Today's session, it's actually a teaser. It's thought-provoking, and I'm happy to be here with my panel members whom we have assembled from different sections, industry, academia, and then also within the NGOs sector. So without much ado, we will dive into the conversations right away. And the session would involve 3 key rounds. The first one, we just want to set the pace. And then second one, we want to look deeper into the issues at hand. And then finally, we look at the support systems that are available for school leaders. So first, I would want us to deliberate on why school leaders to even begin with. So my first question, I would want Amanda and Agustina to actually have a look at this question for us. In your view, what does school leadership even mean when we want to talk about gender equity? So within the gender equity context, when we talk of school leadership, what do we mean?
So since we have translation to Portuguese, I think that it's important for me to speak in Portuguese for the Brazilian audience, so I will do so. So I will move to Português.
Okay.
Bom dia a todos os participantes. É uma alegria estar aqui com vocês. Eu sou Amanda Sadalla, cofundadora e diretora executiva da Serenas, uma organização que trabalha pela prevenção de violências contra meninas e mulheres no Brasil. Nós apoiamos governos no desenvolvimento de políticas públicas voltadas à construção de políticas educacionais antissexistas, antirracistas e voltadas à prevenção de violências contra meninas e mulheres. Essa pergunta, Ellen, ela me remete a muitas histórias, porque antes da criação das Serenas, eu passei muitos anos dentro de escolas públicas no Brasil, desenvolvendo projetos diretamente com estudantes voltados à prevenção da violência sexual e violência doméstica. E me vem à mente muitas lideranças escolares que se tornaram referências para os estudantes quando o tema era violência doméstica e sexual. Me vem à mente professoras que vinham me contar que eram elas a quem as alunas buscavam quando em casa elas sofriam abuso sexual. O Brasil é um país extremamente perigoso para meninas. Hoje nós temos, a cada hora, 4 meninas vítimas de estupro no nosso país, especialmente praticado por pais, padrastos, irmãos e vizinhos. E é na escola onde essas meninas buscam ajuda. E a quem elas recorrem? As lideranças escolares, as professoras, as pessoas que ficam nos corredores, as merendeiras, as pessoas que fazem a limpeza do banheiro. Por mim, eu entendo que liderança escolar não necessariamente é a pessoa que tem o cargo de líder oficial, mas é aquela pessoa que os estudantes compreendem enquanto liderança, que os estudantes compreendem enquanto alguém que move aquele grupo, enquanto alguém que pode promover mudanças dentro da escola. Quantas vezes eu também vi professoras chorando, vindo conversar comigo, dizendo: eu não sei o que fazer, porque eu tenho estudantes que me buscam, porque estão sofrendo algum tipo de violência praticada por outros professores, e as secretarias de educação não estão me dando ouvido, e eu preciso fazer alguma coisa. Mas também quantas vezes eu vi, Ellen, professoras e outras profissionais da escola fazendo projetos fantásticos de prevenção e enfrentamento à violência doméstica e sexual. Eu vi diversas escolas e nós vemos nas Serenas projetos fantásticos, projetos de prevenção, escolas que fazem produção de materiais didáticos de prevenção desde a primeira infância até o ensino médio, projetos em que os estudantes levam esse tema para suas famílias e comunidades. Então, eu entendo que dentro da escola, quando em casa esse tema não pode ser falado, quando esse tema, a violência, ela é reproduzida diariamente, é dentro da escola que professores, professoras, merendeiras, coordenadores pedagógicos têm a oportunidade de transformar valores, de transformar referências, de serem referências para os estudantes, né? Então, para mim, me vem realmente muitas histórias reais, concretas, de pessoas que, como eu disse, liderança não precisa ser a pessoa que oficialmente recebeu esse cargo, mas que é uma referência para o estudante e que tem o poder de fazer essa mobilização dos estudantes e de fazer algum tipo de transformação lá dentro e trazer uma nova referência. Para finalizar, eu só queria dizer que nas Serenas, a gente trabalha muito com o que nós chamamos de ciclo intergeracional de violência, que é esse entendimento da violência que passa de avó para mãe, para filha, de avô, de pai para filho. Essa violência que se repete de geração em geração, que são tantas meninas que eu conheci em tantas escolas que sofrem violência, mas entendem que isso é natural, que é assim mesmo, porque suas mães sofreram e suas avós também. E meninos que reproduzem violência porque seus pais reproduzem essa violência, seus avós. E é na escola, por conta de lideranças escolares que ensinam outras formas de comportamento, que não são violentas e sim baseadas em respeito, que elas crescem com novos ideais de relações que são saudáveis. Então, ali a gente tem uma oportunidade de transformação. Obrigada.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for that insightful contribution out there. So let's move to Agustina. What do you also think? What does school leadership mean to you in the context of gender equity?
Bueno, buenos días, buenas tardes a todos. La verdad que escuchando a Amanda resuenan muchísimas de sus historias en lo que pienso personalmente y en lo que trato de avanzar como líder. En mi caso, el liderazgo con perspectiva de género, que mire, que vaya hacia la equidad, lo entiendo como una práctica principalmente reflexiva, pero no como una práctica reflexiva para que quede en el mundo interior, sino la conciencia de que la reflexividad, que ese momento de pensamiento, de un modo inevitable llega a las acciones. Es como este ejercicio de poder constantemente o en momentos oportunos mezclar el propósito como líder y la práctica, lo que pasa en la escuela, que son los ejemplos que cuenta Amanda, docentes, maestranza, directivos, lidiando con situaciones de violencia de género constante, ¿no? Siendo mentores de alumnas que se acercan a ellos, alumnas o alumnos, y entrando en desesperación por no sentirse capaces de ayudar, pero en paralelo estas mismas personas construyendo programas que realmente ayudan desde la práctica reflexiva, desde la cultura escolar de cada una de las disciplinas, construir, ¿no? Dispositivos para todos poder pensar desde un lugar con mayor cuidado, ¿no? Para aprender a cuidarnos, para aprender a cuidar a otros. Entonces, desde el liderazgo, fomentar la práctica reflexiva con nuestros equipos docentes no genera solamente un espacio invisible de mundo interior, sino que genera espacios de autonomía, de poder sentir que lo que te pasa, lo que pensás, lo que opinás, le pasa a tu compañero de al lado, a tu compañera, y entre todos sentirnos más confiados y seguros en las decisiones que vamos tomando, incluso copiando lo que hizo otra persona, y como líder poder generar ese espacio horizontal de conversación, porque no por nada, al menos estamos hablando del sur global, yo hablo de Latinoamérica, de Argentina, igual que mi compañera, pero estamos hablando del sur global, en donde los temas principales de gestión es hay que ir hacia el liderazgo distribuido, y el liderazgo distribuido implica formación, implica que todos nos formemos en autonomía, generemos espacios autónomos, que eso luego empodera, genera mentorías, genera potencia en las acciones. Así que, como para cerrar mi postura, siento que una base para incorporar la perspectiva de género y la perspectiva de todos los sesgos, estigmatizaciones y estereotipos que cargamos culturalmente, ¿no? Es fomentar, generar, diseñar espacios de práctica reflexiva para dejar la semilla de autonomía, de confianza y de reflexión en los equipos, que va mucho más que incluso que docentes, en la comunidad educativa, en madres, padres, exalumnos, todas las personas que forman parte de una comunidad. Y avanzar hacia el liderazgo distribuido, que tiene que ser formado, porque ponerle el micrófono a alguien o darle una tarea a alguien no es liderazgo distribuido. Así que esto sería como mi aporte totalmente conectado con lo que escuché recién de Amanda, ¿no? La práctica reflexiva como base del liderazgo escolar.
Thank you very much to you, Agustina and Amanda. I mean, these were such an insightful exposition out there. And audience out there, if you have any questions, put it down. You can use the Q&A session, or you can wait. We will have the Q&A session at the end of the day. Thank you very much. And having learned about what school leadership is within the context of gender equity, we would also want to know why then it matters, okay? We would want to know why school leadership is then such a powerful lever when we really want to advance gender equity within the education system. So we will call on Antara to give a comment on that.
Thank you so much, Ellen. It's such a pleasure and honor to be here with these amazing colleagues on the panel, and looking forward to some robust questions and discussions in the Q&A. Principals, school leaders are absolutely integral for teaching gender equality and having children grow up be gender equal. I would almost say that it's not possible to achieve gender equality through schools without school leaders being committed to it. And I'll tell you 3 reasons why. The first is these are the people who hold the whole system accountable. They make the guidelines and they hold systems accountable. And no matter which country I have worked in, I have found that really great school leaders find a way to implement their vision. Regardless of what the policy is that's coming, the directive that's coming, if they believe in a principle, they will figure out a way to make it happen. And the way most budgets and policies work, this supports them. So when you look at something like gender-based violence, for example, no matter how supportive or unsupportive the policy landscape is in a country to prevent gender-based violence and then prosecute perpetrators of gender-based violence, who in many cases are men teachers and men workers, school leadership is critical, not only to respond, but to prevent. They set the standard, especially if they are men, but also if they are women. If a school leader does not take up a case seriously, if a school leader hasn't set up, really robust and sensitive reporting mechanisms, if a school leader doesn't invest in this, it's not going anywhere. And you are bringing up generations of children who are going through that school believing that gender-based violence is okay. As a reminder, 1 in 3 women in the world experience gender-based violence in their lifetime, and 25% of 15 to 19-year-old girls around the world have experienced gender-based and sexual violence. 25%. So these school leaders have a huge, huge role to play. And I know my colleagues earlier talked about this as well. Second, because in most, I'm speaking here of government schools, but even for private schools, they do have to interface a lot with the ministries. So they are in charge of budgets. They get to decide how budgets are spent. And very importantly, they interface with other parts of the services infrastructure, whether that's meal provision, whether that's transport, whether that's healthcare. The school principal, a truly visionary school principal, a feminist school principal will realize that, especially for marginalized kids, it's not just about teachers and classrooms and books and what the kids experience in classrooms. It's about providing nutrition to children. It's about providing healthcare to children. And yes, I'm saying that is a feminist issue because these are also areas where girls sometimes do not get as much as boys in their own homes. There's a lot of caregiving involved, and that takes up a lot of time, especially for adolescent girls. Having access to safe, supportive healthcare, especially sexual and reproductive health and rights, is really important. Teaching all children about consent. So these are also things that they can liaise with the Department of Health. They can liaise with the Department of Transport to make sure that the kids can get to school and leave safely. Finally, and by the way, some of the most amazing changes I've seen are when school principals come together to say, you know what, we want nutritious local meals for our children, and we're going to get it from women's collectives. So that's a way they impact communities beyond what they're teaching children. So they're not just leaders in the school; they can be really leaders in the community. And most importantly, perhaps they inspire. A school leader is in a position to take a bunch of teachers, some of whom are unionized, have been in the system for decades, and are waiting to get to retirement, some of whom are young and new and inspired. And a school leader is in that position to say, hey, you are the most powerful person in this community because you are influencing the next generation of kids. Same with the students. You walk into a school and you see children and you see how they behave, and it tells you what the school principal is like. Because children who are curious, children who are confident are coming from a school environment that promotes that. So the inspiration that a school leader can provide in being a feminist leader and being a transformative leader is also huge. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I actually can resonate with the issue of school leaders holding systems accountable and what have you. So I was actually involved in a study where we were working with school leaders across in a high school. So even the gender of school leaders even matter in efforts or in issues that has to do with promoting and ensuring gender equitable issues. So I agree. And the fact that we cannot overlook their role, especially when we want to talk about gender and equitable school systems. Thank you very much, Antara. So the next one, we would want to know from Martha, based on your experiences, how can we then foster or how can we embed training and development within equitable principles to support school leaders so as to be able to execute what they are supposed to do effectively and confidently?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure to be part of this discussion. And anything that relates to gender equity and equality, I'm always happy to engage in those conversations, because that's where majority of us are advocating for, to have an equitable society, to have a community that is all embracing. And so when we talk about school leadership, we are looking at an environment that fosters inclusivity, an environment that looks at welfare, an environment that values principles, an environment where decision-making is always thinking about, what does this mean for gender? What does this decision mean? What impact does it have on each and every person within the school? And when we talk about the schools, we are talking about, when we talk about the school environment, we are talking about teachers, we are talking about students, we are talking about the support staff, we are talking about all that. So when we are talking about school leadership, we're basically focusing on challenging gender biases. And these gender biases within the school, they may range from classrooms, they may go ahead in terms of staffing, they may move into the entire culture of the school. And so it has already been said, but I just want to emphasize one or two things. When we are looking at the school curriculum, for instance, when we are looking at the teaching and learning practices, we are looking at an environment that is inclusive. And therefore, a good leader will go into what we call a gender audit. And in this gender audit, the whole purpose is looking at the teaching and learning materials and ensuring that if any stereotypes exist, they support the teachers to make sure that all this is not part of the school teaching and learning materials. It calls for mentorship. It calls for support from the leaders to the teachers if we are to make the school gender responsive or gender transformative. What is the hiring process like? Is there gender consideration within the hiring to ensure that it's balanced? What about the students in the school? Do they have a voice where they are able to air out their issues? Is attention paid to the girls and boys? If we are looking at leadership within the school, are we looking at only boys in the leadership, or does the leadership ensure that there are both boys and girls within the leadership and they're able to air out issues? And the last one, which Antara alluded to, it's about having zero tolerance to discrimination within the school environment. Implementation and enforcement of policies, setting policies within the school. Are they against gender-based harassment, school-related gender-based violence, discrimination? The leadership should be able to send strong messages in relation to that. And the leaders must also ensure that there are clear reporting mechanisms. Is it safe? Is it confidential? Is it effective? I think that's what needs to be put in place to ensure that there is that open communication, there is that open interaction, and that would ensure that the school is gender responsive. I can stop at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honestly, you helped us in our next question, and you were able to also highlight some of the challenges that continuously pervade in our education systems. The fact that our education system, the examples that we use, continue to either reinforce these stereotypical issues against the gender. So you see that in a classroom, leader or class leader, it's always the guy. When it has to even career choices, we unintentionally encourage the male towards a certain profession, whereas women are also directed towards a certain professions. Now, and aside the other social cultural norms and values that also tend to perpetuate these things, we carry it with us in the classroom. And you were able to tell us how school leaders can decolonize or unlock some of these things, and then ensure that the classroom is gender responsive. And you use a very fantastic word, gender responsive pedagogies in the classroom. So thank you for that. So I would want Amanda, if you have any other additions to how school leaders can actually challenge some of these stereotypes, some of these biases that continuously pervade in our classroom system. Amanda, any addition?
Obrigada. É muito bom ouvir tudo que as colegas trazem. Eu também dei uma olhada aqui nos comentários, nas perguntas. Inclusive, a gente tem uma pergunta da Secretaria de Educação de São Paulo, que foi uma das secretarias com a qual a Serenas trabalhou. Nós formamos 30 mil professores aqui no estado de São Paulo, na temática de violência doméstica. E foi um grande desafio, porque é um estado muito conservador. A gente tem no Brasil uma política antigênero extremamente forte. Então, é muito desafiador quando a gente vai entrar dentro da escola para falar sobre a temática de gênero, né? O que a Serenas tem feito, e eu acho que dialoga muito com o que a gente tem conversado aqui, é também buscar quais formas a gente tem para falar sobre gênero, mas de uma forma que seja que a escola seja receptiva a nós e também a outros movimentos que vão trabalhar essa temática. E recentemente nós lançamos uma pesquisa sobre as percepções da comunidade escolar a respeito de violências contra meninas e mulheres. E uma das principais razões pelas quais a comunidade escolar diz que não trabalha a temática de violência de gênero no Brasil é justamente o medo das famílias de se trabalhar esse tema, por conta da resistência à temática de gênero e por conta dessa visão que se tem no Brasil, muito reforçada pelos movimentos de direita no país, de que se falar de gênero significa impor uma sexualidade precoce às crianças, que é justamente o oposto do que nós fazemos, né? As evidências mostram que quando a gente trabalha a prevenção das violências de gênero, assim como a educação integral em sexualidade, os adolescentes tendem a postergar a primeira relação sexual e há uma diminuição, inclusive, da gravidez na adolescência. Então, as evidências mostram o contrário do que essa política antigênero tem disseminado no país. Mas as escolas têm muito medo de se trabalhar essa temática. O que nós temos feito é entrado na escola através da perspectiva da prevenção de violências, porque o que nós vemos, especialmente no próprio Congresso, é que direita e esquerda, independente do partido, todos são muito a favor de prevenir a violência contra crianças, adolescentes e mulheres. Mesmo os partidos mais conservadores se colocam muito favoráveis a isso. Por que eu estou trazendo isso numa discussão sobre lideranças escolares? Porque as lideranças escolares refletem o que a sociedade é. E a pesquisa também mostrou que os professores e lideranças escolares também expressam muitos estereótipos de gênero e violências de gênero. Então, a gente também precisa saber dialogar com os vieses machistas, sexistas dos profissionais da educação. Essa pesquisa mostrou, por exemplo, que 45% dos professores, eu estou falando de uma pesquisa que traz uma visão nacional no nosso país, 45% dos professores não conseguem reconhecer estereótipos de gênero e violências de gênero enquanto violência. Então, o que isso nos mostra, né? Que a gente precisa fazer uma sensibilização e conscientização desses profissionais, que não basta só a gente compreender a importância desses profissionais, mas também sensibilizá-los. Não adianta a gente exigir que eles queiram transformar uma nova geração de estudantes e exigir deles comportamentos que a eles não foram ensinados. Então, por isso a importância de sensibilizar estes profissionais, de capacitar esses profissionais, de também mudar os vieses destes profissionais. E quando nós, nas capacitações, nas formações, trabalhamos isso com os profissionais, é lindo, é muito bonito ver como eles transformam os seus vieses, os seus achismos, os seus preconceitos e conseguem no dia a dia da escola mudar a forma como tratam os seus estudantes, tanto deixando de reproduzir violências de gênero, mas também deixando de reproduzir vieses inconscientes que geram uma desigualdade enorme entre os estudantes.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you very much. Thanks so much. Antara, I'll come back to you. Can you share an experience where a school leader have actually challenged, made a decision to challenge some existing gender stereotype prevailing in the school system?
I grew up in the city of Bombay in India and had the great privilege of going to now that I look back, a very feminist school, even though that language was not used. As some examples, this is in the 90s, our physics and chemistry textbooks were from Kenya and Ghana, actually, which is very rare in India, but I think rare around the world. And so she really made an effort to, be sort of be universal in her approach, and she really taught us that. And when I was 9 years old, every child in my school went through this. We had to go through advertisements in magazines to identify gender stereotypes. So we were taught the word stereotype when we were 9 years old. And that experience of seeing how gendered these ads were, they still are, but back then it was even worse. All the cars are being advertised with men, all the washing powder and detergent is being advertised with women. I felt like I saw that and I could never unsee that in my whole life. And today there's a whole world of programming on addressing gender stereotypes in schools, including from UNGEI. So that was inspired by my school principal. In my work, there was another school principal who really inspired me. We had done gender transformative leadership with her. This is also in India. And this is in a rural community, first generation schoolgoers, children of farmers, semi-literate. These kids, even though they're going through the government schooling, they're not actually fully literate, which is the case in so many places around the world. And the school principal, once she went through this training, she just got really, there's a few things she just like, I am going to change this. And so for adolescent girls, she realized they all walk to school through the fields. And she went on a walk with them to understand the dangers they face as they're walking to school. And she realized that they walk by tea shops where men are sitting and drinking tea, and girls don't feel comfortable doing that. They also walk past an informal liquor store, which is even worse. So she actually worked with the community to change that. And I thought that was just so visionary. And then the other thing she did was she had been very proud when we started that there was one playground and it was for all boys and girls. As we sort of worked together and I was sharing with her data and stats on how sometimes girls need single sex spaces, she actually created a separate playground for girls. found a sportswoman to come and teach the girls. I mean, I don't know where she found the budget for these things for, but she did. And so it was a very different space, after a year. There were girls playing sports, which is something you do not see very commonly around the world. So I thought that was really special. And then one thing that was also special was um, in across South Asia, in government schools, you'll have posters of freedom fighters, or national heroes, and they're almost always men, except for the first woman prime minister in India, who was the daughter of the prime minister. So I pointed that out to her, and she's like, I hadn't thought of that. And then when I went back to her school a year later, more than half the posters were of women, and women from the community, not just sort of national heroes. So I just thought it was amazing how, she was her responses were very rooted in what was going on in her community and school. And you could see the difference in the children, not just the girls, but the boys too. You can tell how children hold themselves and move when they're in a space where they're learning about rights.
Thank you. That's quite a very good example. And as you were talking, one thing was going through my mind: what was the gender of these school leaders? And the fact that if a woman school leader is much more likely to be transformative as far as fostering some of these equitable strategies are concerned. Thank you on that. Now, Agustina, we will come back to you with what are some of the barriers, in as much as school leaders may want to enforce some of these practices to challenge existing stereotypes. I mean, there are often resistance, right, either from your staff or it could be from even institution. So in your experience as a school leader, what has been some of the major barriers in attempts to ensure gender equitable school systems?
Por un lado, Marta trajo esto de la importancia de tener auditoría, de conocer qué está pasando, de ir a buscar esos datos. Creo que no estamos acostumbrados a ir a buscar datos, a visibilizar violencias invisibles, violencias naturalizadas, violencias que no solo los jóvenes o niños, niñas no registran, sino que los propios adultos no registran. Sí, entonces, por un lado, creo que una barrera enorme es la falta de entrenamiento como líder en ir a hacer auditoría, ir a buscar qué datos, cuál es la realidad, porque la realidad tiene que ser soberana. Si no, nos gobiernan prejuicios, nos gobiernan políticas o partidos políticos o incluso ministerios de educación. Y sabemos que la escuela crece cuando avanza también por los intersticios, en el in-between, ¿no? Entonces, por un lado eso. Y por otro lado, otra barrera que es con la que hoy en día a mí más me interpela y que tiene que ver específicamente con lo que Amanda contó. En Argentina se vive un proceso lamentablemente igual al que ella describió, en donde hay una tendencia a avanzar en política antigénero. Entonces, cuando uno llega al aula, a la escuela, al equipo de docentes, a hablar de género, parece que estamos inculcando sexualidad precoz, bueno, todo lo que Amanda ya describió. Entonces, en concreto, la barrera principal es la falta, que yo encuentro, ¿no? Es la falta de una escucha madura, de aprender entre todos a escuchar una perspectiva sin necesidad de reaccionar, o reaccionar a favor o reaccionar en contra, porque la reacción es lo contrario al pensamiento. Por eso vuelvo a la práctica reflexiva, o sea, poder entrenarnos todos para poder pensar, o sea, escuchar una perspectiva y dejarla caer, sedimentar, vibrar, poder pensar con una perspectiva sin necesidad de reaccionar, de o enseguida adquirirla o enseguida rechazarla. Porque cuando pasa eso, estamos otra vez no siendo gobernados por la realidad, sino por sesgos, estigmatizaciones, tendencias, partido político. Así que a modo de cierre, me parece que sí, poder es una barrera no tener una escucha madura y consecuentemente hay que construir espacios seguros de conversación colectiva, ¿no? Porque ese es otro punto, dejar de pensarnos exclusivamente como sujetos individuales, en donde mi reacción tiene que ver con mi trayectoria personal, sino empezar a pensarnos en instituciones como sujetos colectivos, en donde mi reacción, en donde justamente la reflexión me lleva a reaccionar desde la protección de lo colectivo, no de mi individualidad. Entonces eso es lo que me gustaría aportar.
Thank you, Agustina. So we move on to our last round of questions, where we look at issues of training and support systems and what have you. So I'll begin with Amanda. Amanda, what types of training or mentoring or network systems do you think school leaders need to be able to confidently execute some of these things that we've talked about from the beginning?
Essa é uma ótima pergunta. Nesses últimos 4 anos, a gente vem testando muitos tipos de treinamento para diferentes públicos escolares. Eu acho importante dividir com vocês que na Serenas nós fazemos muito treinamentos, especialmente para as lideranças da Secretaria de Educação. Isso é algo muito importante para nós, porque a Antara falou bastante sobre a questão de orçamento. E isso para nós é muito importante, porque sem orçamento uma política não se sustenta. Então, por isso, nós fazemos o treinamento das lideranças da Secretaria de Educação, que são justamente as pessoas que vão definir o orçamento da Secretaria de Educação. Porque são essas pessoas que vão dizer, vai ter orçamento para a equidade de gênero? Vai ter orçamento para prevenção de violência? Vai ter orçamento para construção de fluxos, para encaminhamento de casos de violência dentro e fora da escola ou não? Vai ter orçamento para a parte de transporte ter um olhar de gênero, por exemplo, ou não? E por aí vai. Então, por isso, para a gente é tão importante treinar as lideranças das secretarias de educação. E quando eu digo isso significa que nós já trabalhamos com algumas secretarias de educação em diferentes estados do Brasil, e normalmente elas entram em contato conosco e dizem, Amanda, nós queremos fazer um trabalho com as Serenas e nós queremos que vocês treinem as escolas. E a minha resposta sempre é, a Serena só faz o trabalho se o secretário ou a secretária de educação for treinada. E eles congelam. Não, mas a agenda do secretário de educação é muito cheia, porque tem muitas outras prioridades. Nós não fazemos o trabalho se as lideranças da Secretaria de Educação não forem treinadas. Isso para nós é muito essencial, porque eu acho uma grande hipocrisia nós exigirmos das lideranças das escolas que elas saibam fazer o trabalho, mas as lideranças da Secretaria de Educação não saibam. Não é mesmo? Até porque as escolas depois viram para nós e falam, ué, a família depois vai brigar comigo porque eu tô trabalhando gênero, e como eu vou argumentar por que eu tô trabalhando esse tema? Se a Secretaria de Educação está capacitada sobre isso, a escola vai se sentir qualificada, vai se sentir segura, vai se sentir legitimada para também trabalhar esse tema. Então, isso é importante de dizer. A gente também faz essa capacitação com a Secretaria de Educação. Os tipos de treinamentos. É importante também ressaltar que os professores, eles estão muito sobrecarregados. Os professores no Brasil, eles têm diversas temáticas com as quais eles têm que trabalhar. Quando nós chegamos com mais uma temática, eles falam, meu Deus, mais algo que eu tenho que trabalhar. E é importante dizer que trabalhar a prevenção da violência de gênero e a equidade de gênero, na verdade, vai tirar um peso dos ombros deles. Porque hoje eles se veem todos os dias desesperados com casos de violência de gênero, com casos de violência sexual, que eles não sabem como trabalhar. E a partir do momento que eles têm um treinamento sobre isso, isso vai tirar um peso deles. Então, a gente também tenta trazer essa abordagem. Na verdade, isso vai tirar um peso de vocês, isso vai facilitar a vida de vocês. Os nossos treinamentos, eles são, na sua maioria, para os professores, são treinamentos online ou através de materiais didáticos, ou treinamentos dados pelas lideranças da Secretaria de Educação, que são capacitadas e replicam esse treinamento. Porque o Brasil tem dimensões continentais, a gente não daria conta de chegar em todas as escolas. E sobre o conteúdo desses treinamentos, né? É importante dizer que a gente trabalha desde as raízes das desigualdades de gênero até as violências de gênero. Então, não é um treinamento sobre violência, é um treinamento que começa nas raízes das desigualdades até chegar nas violências e como eu aplico isso no dia a dia da sala de aula. E não é sobre dar uma aula sobre violência. A gente também trabalha sobre como ensinar aos estudantes na faixa etária adequada como trabalhar a temática de violência. Mas é mais do que isso. É sobre como, numa aula de matemática, eu dar exemplos em que eu trabalhe, por exemplo, desigualdades de gênero. É como numa aula de história, eu trabalhar mais histórias de mulheres. Mulheres negras, mulheres indígenas, mulheres com muito mais representatividade. Então, é incluir no currículo a representatividade de diferentes mulheres. Então, é importante trazer aqui que não é só sobre falar sobre violência. E é também falar sobre relações saudáveis. É sobre, no dia a dia da escola, o professor trabalhar como eu me relaciono com consentimento de uma forma saudável, o que significa respeito. A gente ensina muito aos educadores sobre masculinidades saudáveis, o que significa ser um menino de forma saudável. É um pouquinho de tudo.
Thank you. That's quite exhaustive presentation out there. So, all right, I think it's okay now. All right, so Martha, could you please share some lesson that we can actually draw from successful initiatives that have been implemented elsewhere, and how that have improved gender equity in schools? And then also, I would just want you to add the last bit. How can we then scale these interventions up to other systems or other areas?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Elena. When we talk about lessons, I think there is a lot that has happened, particularly from the NGO, the civil society fraternity. I think there's been a lot of effort that has been put in. And one of it is to do with community engagement. I know this has already been shared, but as the FAWE, as an institution that has worked on to gender equity for over the years, we do believe that engaging communities, especially parents and the local leaders, contributes a lot to creating gender equity, particularly in the schools and as even in the classrooms. And when we engage the school community, it also has the potential to shift norms, because most of the things that happen around the schools, it's about the gender norms. So what has worked is engaging communities, because some of the things that come into the school come right from the families, and that also helps in ensuring that what prevails within the school are the positive gender norms. And if we are to scale this up from what has worked, to scale it up to a wider community, then we need to engage strategies that cut across, because it may happen in one community, but it may not be exactly the same way it would happen in another community. So coming up with mechanisms that help in cross-cultural learnings, I think that is what I feel works, because communities are different, but the principles could be the same. What has worked again is looking at, I'm trying to give an example of where good teachers are promoted to leadership. And when these good teachers are moved from the classrooms and promoted to leadership without good or proper training, they may be good teachers, but they may not necessarily be leaders. So what has happened within the civil society organizations is coming up with programs that support the leaders within the school to understand what it means to be a leader of a school, to understand what is expected of them, and also to understand that the whole school is looking onto them. What else works is to do with having the right data, particularly when it comes to decision making. If data within the school is gender disaggregated, if issues, concerns within the school are gender disaggregated, excuse me, then it makes it easy when it comes to making the rightful decisions. You look at issues of attendance. Attendance per se it needs to be gender disaggregated. If it's about the male teachers and the female teachers, the school has to go deep to understand why, for instance, are female teachers more absent than the male teachers. And if that data is available, then the gender responsive school leadership will look into the root causes and try to address the issues that could be responsible for female teachers, for instance, being absent. What about the performance? The dropout rates within the schools. If there is no data on dropout rates, then it becomes very difficult to address some of those issues that could be leading to dropout. But when there is data, when it is available, the teachers go a mile ahead to try and support the girls, the boys, to avoid the school dropout. And this will help also the leaders within the school to identify the gaps. And when they identify the gaps, they will definitely come up with targeted interventions. And this, in terms of scaling up, it calls for support from the ministries of education. It calls for support in terms of standardizing data collection. This must be led by the ministries of education or the relevant institutions. Because if it is not standardized, then you'll find some good practices in one school, but when you move to the other school, you'll find that it's lacking. So that is an experience that we have, we have known, and we have come up with different strategies to help ministries of education and also help the teachers within the schools. The other that works, if the schools are gender responsive, is to do with the peer learning, the peer learning networks. There are many successful models out there that include networking of school leaders, so that what the leaders are able to learn from each other. I know in many countries, all schools are not the same. You will find schools that are very good in terms of leadership, and the whole thing is try to understand if school A is doing very well, there is gender responsiveness within the school. Why is school B not doing the same? And that can only be sorted by having peer learning, peer networking among the school leadership. But again, to be able to scale that from one school to the other, it also calls for ministries and civil society organizations to help and scale up the positive in terms of why it has worked, why it has not worked. And that again drives us to the issue of documentation of what is happening so that it facilitates learning across the different institutions. The last one that I can point to is to do with policy alignment. What if the schools or if governments have very clear policies, then these policies or programs will be aligned with the school. And once it is aligned within the different schools, the efforts with national support, they will be able to be implemented from one school to the other. I just want to give an example of policy alignment, for instance, where in a country like Uganda, some years back, there was a policy that if you are having school leadership, if the school head is a male, automatically the deputy will be the female. If the school head is a female, then the deputy would be a male. And that is what is standardized, and it is a policy angle, and it helps in ensuring that there's gender equity and equality within the schools. And when we talk about alignment in terms of policy, there are also incentives. It has worked. We've rewarded teachers. We've rewarded the best performing schools. We've rewarded the best performing students. And these rewards have proven to be very effective. It also creates competitiveness among students. It also creates competitiveness among the teachers, and scaling this up also requires to ensure that the policies are also flexible, that the policies are not rigid, and that the teachers are also given opportunity to contribute to those policies. Once the teachers contribute, then they will accommodate the policies, and then they will also ensure that there is accountability. I think those are some of the examples that I can give in terms of experience of what has worked. Thank you.
Wow. That's interesting to note. So audience, we know we've kept you out of the loop for a while. Now let's get interactive for a quick poll, and then we just take only 2 questions from you, and then we call it a day. So the first question, what do you personally feel will be the sign that schools are gender equitable? Okay, so majority of us think that when the school is free from bias, when the school culture is the one that discourages bias of any other form. The second highest was when there is equal leadership representation. I think the last panelist actually threw kind of light on this one. Okay, so for the sake of time, we only take this poll. Now, audience, we are taking only 2 questions. You can raise your hand or you put it in the chat. We've got a few of them in the chat anyway, so just raise your hand for only 2. We are taking just 2 questions from the audience. Okay, so there's one that wants to know about we taking the conversation out of the school leaders into the community. And for that matter, that community leaders also, or the community at large also have a role to play. So the person wants to know what strategies have also proven useful in engaging communities on issues about gender equity. And I think Martha in the last statement picked the matter. Can you just briefly throw just a light on that one? What strategies have proven successful in engaging community at large when it comes to issues of ensuring gender equity?
Yeah, thank you. I can mention 1 or 2. One of the strategies is the involving parents, the communities into school activities. For instance, we have the Parents Teachers Association. So during those sessions, there is deliberate effort to share with the communities in terms of what works, in terms of what does not work, and what their role is in promoting gender equity within the schools. Like I mentioned earlier, that the first institution of gender bias or gender equity is the family, it's the community. Before it gets to the school, it is starting at the community, at the institution, the family institution. So when the community is brought into school, the second one is that the children play a very critical role in this whole process. And how children do it is that they put it in plays, they put it in songs, they pass on messages to the community, because they may not be able to openly tell the parents or the local leadership that this is what's happening, but they have different mechanisms. Particularly, they will act a play. If a girl was raped within the community, there will be a play that will be acted. There will be songs that will be sung to pass the message to the community. So those are some of the mechanisms that can work to make sure that the information gets to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. Another person wants to know, in what ways can school leaders help the girl child build themselves up to prevent gender-based violence outside the school? Antara, can you just briefly attend to this question as we wrap up?
Two things. One, girls need to believe that they don't deserve it and that it's not normal. Around the world, too many girls still think that this is okay. And they think that this is okay because they see women in their lives having to be okay with it and also believing that. Two, it's not just we need boys to understand that too. Boys need to understand consent. So consent. Every child in the world needs to understand that you cannot touch another person, far worse, be violent with another person. Even touching, there has to be consent. I think that is the key.
Thank you very much. So all too soon, we have come to the end of those insightful conversations around how school leaders can actually foster a gender equitable school. Thanks so much to the panelists for such sharing your experiences, and to you audience as well for your time in listening to us. So on that note, I would just hand it over to the rep from the Global School Leaders to take over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It's so hard to unpack gender in 60 minutes. Thank you, Ellen, for attempting to do that, and to our wonderful panelists for sharing decades worth of work that you've put into unpacking this very theme into 60 minutes. To our audience, thank you for being so engaged. We will be sharing recordings and resources from this session as part of our post-summit communication. So please do keep an eye out for that. And with that, we'd like to close this session and day 2. Tomorrow, we have 3 exciting sessions planned with regional focuses on LATAM, Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia and South Asia. So please check the chat box if you'd like to join us for those sessions. Thank you, everybody, again, for taking the time out of your busy schedules and joining us. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.